For decades, the United States and Iran maintained a volatile status quo. They traded blows through regional proxies and economic sanctions, a shadow war designed to hurt the opponent without triggering a direct, all-out military confrontation. That status quo accelerated toward a breaking point in late February 2026. The U.S. and Israel launched coordinated, direct military strikes on Iranian soil, hitting military infrastructure and nuclear-related sites like these centrifuge facilities. The operation reached the highest level of the Iranian state. During the strikes, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed, an event that removed the central authority of the Iranian government. In most military conflicts, tactical strikes on assets or commanders leave political leaders with a way out through back-channel diplomacy. But striking a head of state targets the very institution that authorizes those negotiations, effectively closing the exit ramps for de-escalation. With the ultimate decision-maker gone, the Iranian military was under immediate pressure to prove the regime's survival. This made a measured diplomatic response a political impossibility, forcing the conflict out of the shadows and into an immediate, direct war. The retaliation was nearly instantaneous. Within hours of the strike, Iran launched drones and missiles at U.S. military positions across the region, establishing a new high-intensity tempo for the conflict. By March, the theater of war expanded beyond inland military bases. The primary focus of the fighting shifted toward the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. This shift instantly internationalized the crisis. Roughly one-fifth of the world's oil trade is forced through this narrow waterway, making it the most sensitive choke point in the global energy market. To counter the threat to these shipping lanes, the U.S. and its allies rapidly surged their naval presence, deploying carrier strike groups to protect commercial vessels from incoming fire. By moving the theater of war to a global energy choke point, the conflict weaponized market fear. The stakes were no longer just regional, they were now tied to the stability of the global economy. In June, rising economic pressure forced a temporary pause. Both sides reached an interim agreement where Iran would reduce its enriched uranium stockpile in exchange for limited relief from economic sanctions. That fragile peace relied on the security of international trade. However, over the past week, reports emerged of new attacks on commercial tankers, like this one, operating near the Strait of Hormuz. Washington blamed Iran for the maritime threats. Tehran denied any involvement. Without a central leadership figure to verify intentions, the underlying mistrust caused the June agreement to collapse almost immediately. Today, the U.S. bypassed the negotiating table and launched a new wave of airstrikes against Iranian missile sites, air defense systems, and naval facilities. Iran responded by firing projectiles toward U.S. facilities across the region, including bases in Kuwait, Qatar, and the Naval Support Activity Center in Bahrain. Because the core tensions were merely paused rather than resolved in June, the diplomatic guardrails failed. The conflict has now returned to a cycle of direct military retaliation. The reality on the ground confirms that the interim ceasefire is over. This shift was publicly echoed by former President Donald Trump and is currently being reflected in real-time market volatility. Global markets reacted to today's strikes with immediate panic. Investors, fearing a total disruption, drove an initial surge in fuel and natural gas prices. If the strait remains a combat zone, the economic consequences will cascade. Higher insurance and shipping costs for tankers lead directly to rising prices for goods, worsening consumer inflation across the globe. This crisis moved from a localized strike to a global economic threat in under 3 months. That rapid progression is the direct result of a leadership vacuum colliding with the world's most critical energy transit route. With diplomatic channels now secondary to military operations, the question is no longer if the war will expand, but whether international economic pressure can still force both sides back to the table, or if a wider regional war is now inevitable.